All right, so this unit is going to be about different types of accounts, and we'll talk about how all of them work and the differences and some sort of mathematical formulas for you to know how to pull information and gain information from all of these things. Let's go over some quick vocabulary before we jump into here. So the first account we're going to talk about is a checking account, and this is going to be the most commonly used account when you are in the real world, and it was called a checking account in the very beginning because you used this to write checks. Today you're going to have a debit card that you use mostly, but this is the checking account that you're going to use, or the account that you're going to use the most, because you can deposit and withdraw money. And when I say withdraw, I mean use a bank card. If you write a check, money going in and out without having any fees for making withdrawals. So a lot of times when you have a savings account, which is specifically designed to save money, you could only make so many withdrawals a year without being fined. So we looked at a savings account at one point, and I think we could withdraw 2 times every quarter or every 6 months, and we could only withdraw a certain amount of money. The bank wants you to have a savings account because they can use your money that you have put in the bank account to then provide loans for other people, and the bank then has this money to work on. So they fine you a lot of times to withdraw too much. And again, it's created with the intent for you to save the money. So it's a pretty good idea to have one if you're trying to save money for the future. Now, an overdraw is when you take out more money than is in your bank account. I think some places call it an overdraft, and we talked about that, I think, last unit that you guys did. Now, this unit is going to talk a lot about interest. So there are bank accounts that will allow you to draw interest on certain things. When I was in high school, I had a good friend, her name was Kelly, who every summer she babysat, and every summer she would buy what were called CDs, and it was a certain amount of money that she would invest that would then draw interest, and then after like 18 or 20 years, and the word is matured, it was able to be withdrawn. And she had purchased so many CDs that all came to fruition one year, and she literally took a year off, traveled all over the world, all on this money that she had invested into these CDs that spent 20 years drawing interest. And the interest is money made while your money is being sitting in an account. Sometimes savings accounts will draw interest, not so much anymore. A bank will offer that though, so that you would put your money in their account so they could then have your money to use to make more money. Now the next one, the word is accrue. And this is the sum of money that is increasing over time. That's the money that you're accruing money. It's being increased. A balance is the money that you currently have in your account. If I go on to my phone or my bank and I check my bank statement, I have a balance, and then I have an actual balance, because the balance in my bank is what is actually an actual account. Balance may not be the right word, but the balance is how much money you have in your account. Interest rate is the percent of the rate that is paid on your interest. And so you want to invest into something that will have a high interest rate. You want to borrow on a low interest rate, and we'll talk more about that as we go through this unit and other units as well. A loan is the amount of money borrowed from a bank. If I go borrow a certain amount of money from my bank, they give me a loan. Now, simple and compound interest are two very important things. Simple interest is the interest that is made on what's called a principal loan, and your principal is how much money you start with. So if I invest $1,000, I am going to draw simple interest on $1,000, no matter how long it's in there, just on the principal amount or the amount borrowed. Compound interest is calculated on the original or the principal loan plus all accrued interest. So let's say I deposit $1,000 and I make $50 in interest. The next month, I'm then going to draw interest on the $1,050. And then if I make $55 on interest, I now make money on as I'm growing and growing and growing. Compound interest in the long run is going to be the better outcome because you're going to make interest on the money that you're making as it's sitting in the bank account. All right, then you have this thing called the money market account. This is the bank account that earns interest, and I have hardly ever seen those in any looking at investing. And then a certificate of deposit is called this, we call it typically a CD, and that's what I was talking about before. This is a document that is an agreement to deposit money into an account for a set amount of time at a set amount of interest. And so this is going to be a way to invest in a long-term something that will draw a good interest rate. So if you can find a CD with a high interest rate for 20 years, you can invest in that and you know that interest rate is going to stay the same. Obviously, you may not want to do that when the interest rates are low, and they do fluctuate all the time. Okay? So there's all of the vocabulary we need to be aware of before we actually start this unit. All right, so let's say that you open a savings account and that this savings account draws interest. Typically, a savings account is going to draw a small amount of interest. They're not going to draw a whole lot. But this is 0.5% of your interest rate. Now let's take, in our heads, let's go way back into our pre-algebra. And we can't work with a percent. So what we have to do, technically this is 0.5 over 100 because it's 100%. But then we're just move our decimal 2 places, which gives me 0.005. That's why this is written this way as a decimal, because we move our decimal 2 places. That's terribly written, but that says 2 places. To figure out how much interest you make, you take the amount you deposit, multiply it by your interest rate. That gives you your interest. And this is the problem with savings account. When I say your interest is very, very low, this is paid per year, not per month. Okay? So to figure out how much you pay per month, you then have to divide by 12 to get your monthly payment. So let's say that you do $5,000. We're going to do the same thing. I'll do this one with you. We're going to take that $5,000, multiply it. It's in the same account, so it's bringing the same amount of interest by 0.5%. And again, you can move your decimal or just use your percent key. And this is going to give me 5,000 times 0.5%, $25. But that is annually, or a year. And so what we then have to do is take that $25 and divide it by 12. And that gives me $2. Oh gosh. Let me erase that too and fix it. That gives me $2.08 a month. So on your paper, I believe you have question marks because for some reason I can't print it out that looks like this. So solve those other two so you can visually see the interest rate. And like I said, savings accounts typically do not offer a very high interest rate. 0.5 is 0.5%. Not great. The next page in your packet talks about opening a bank account. And I'm going to tell you, you need to sort of take some time and kind of search around for bank accounts. And even within one bank, there's multiple options. Now, at your age, because you're not old enough, you'll probably have to have a parent sign that with you. I say that. You can have a student account sometimes. I know when we first opened Ryan's and Luke's bank accounts, I had to be on it with them. But that may have just been the bank that they are using. You need to pay attention because you have an ATM card. There are some banks that will charge you for using an ATM machine that is not one of theirs. Joe and I use Wood Forest, and I do not care for our bank, but that's okay. And it used to be, of course, I don't hardly ever use an ATM machine anymore, but it used to be they would charge me, I think, $2.50 anytime I wanted to get cash out of an ATM machine that wasn't theirs. And so a lot of times people look for a large, well-known bank because their ATM machines are everywhere. You can just drive through it. I've heard that sometimes they will charge more fees because they can and because of the easiness of access that they then charge you some more. So just kind of look through different bank account options. I will say this, there are times that banks run specials. They'll say, okay, we'll give you $500 for opening an account. So obviously, if you are opening a bank account and you come across one of those deals, hit them up. Okay, you have an exercise on the bottom of that page. Just work through it. Annalise got paid $857 from her job this week. She has elected to deposit 10% into her savings account and the rest into her checking. So to find 10% of something, you just multiply it by 10%. So do that page and then move to the next one. The next topic is a savings account. And I will tell you, as someone who is 45 years old and has been working since she was 15, I wish and wish and wish that I had started a savings account very early and trained myself to put 10, 5, whatever percentage into a savings account to have some sort of nest egg, right? So if you can start young, opening a savings account, then you have an emergency fund. Your car breaks down and you need money that you weren't expecting or it's not budgeted. You then have a little bit of a nest egg to start running. It's just a really good habit to open a savings account and start working. So there's the bottom in the middle of that page, you have this exercise. Nick's semi-monthly, which means twice a month, net income is $1,200. If he saves 10% of his income each paycheck, how much will he save? So figure out how much 10% of that, and then figure out how much he'll have set aside in a year, which will be 24 paychecks because it's semi-monthly, which means twice a month. All right, work through that one. On the bottom of that same page, you start talking about simple interest, and there's a mathematical formula that will always work to find simple interest, and this is the worldwide known, that may be a little bit dramatic, but you get it, formula for interest. And I is the interest the bank adds to your account. That's just the interest. P is the principal, and the principal is your original amount deposited. It's the original amount deposited. R is the annual interest rate. It's going to be given in a percentage form. And T is time in years. So if you'll sort of, and I think that's all written in your packet, you're going to need all that information. And it's just really easy to figure out how much interest you make by multiplying the principal times your interest rate times the amount of years. That will give you your interest for that amount of money. You have a chart to fill out to figure out your interest earned and your ending balance for different allotments here. So the first one is done for you, and you have the principal of $5,000. That's what you're originally investing. 2% interest rate for 3 years, and you literally just multiply those together. Remember to convert your percent to a decimal. Now that gives me my interest, $300 interest. To find my balance, I have to take my original amount and add my interest earned in there. So you're going to do that, everything in this box. Now here's the thing you have to kind of remember. This is a way to kind of estimate. If I withdraw money out of my account, if I deposit money into my account, these numbers are obviously going to change a little bit. So it's always kind of good to just realize this is going to be a little bit of an estimate when you're thinking about things. So here's a couple of questions. When you're looking for a savings account, what are some important features to research? I'm going to tell you, you need to look for interest-bearing accounts if you can find them. Not as common. And obviously, the higher interest rate that you can find, the better. Think about if there are any fees. Always ask about fees. One of the things our bank does is they charge me $2.50 a month for a paper mailed statement, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if I pay that, so again, I'm 45, I opened a bank account when I was 15, so if we just sort of do some math here, 45 minus 15 means I've had a bank account for 30 years. There are 12 months a year, which means that's 360 months And if I am paying $2.50 a month for that, that's almost $1,000. Okay? So it adds up over time. So watch for any fees. Those are the things you need to look for. This curriculum then says, how does an account's interest rate affect your savings? Obviously, the higher interest rate, you're going to make more money. How does time affect your savings? Where the longer you leave money in something, the more money that you're going to make on it. Okay, so fill in the rest of that chart. And here's a little picture of if you can find a compound interest bank account, the difference. Simple interest only pulls interest off of what you originally put in your bank account. Let's look at this example of compound interest, because what happens is compound interest grows interest off of what you have made. So this is a 3-year projection here. And in our first year, we put $3,000 into a savings account. The interest paid was 1% for 1 year was $30. That gives me $3,030 by my second year. So I now start with $3,030. I invest another $3,000. So I have a total of $6,030. And $3,000 kind of sounds like a lot. At least it does to me. But if I look at that per month, that's $250. Most of us get paid twice a month. If I divide that by 2, it's only $125 a month. So if you begin setting aside a little bit at a time, it will add up. And because this is compound interest, I now get interest on what I started with, the interest earned, and what I add to it. So then I now have $60 in interest, which puts me up to $6,090. My third year, $6,090. I'm going to continue to invest that $125 every paycheck, which is a total of $3,000 over the year. I now draw interest off of all of that and end up with $9,118. And you can see the progression here, 30, 60, 90. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you can learn to invest in a situation like this, you're going to see some major improvements as time goes. Now there's 4 questions here that I would like for you to just work out. If Manny has been depositing $3,000 per year into his savings account, calculate how much that is per month. You know what? Don't even worry about that. You have plenty of problems in your work packet. So just forget what I just said and don't worry about these 4 extra problems. The formula for compound interest isn't quite as simple as just multiplying straight across. So let's talk about what everything means on this formula. A is the account's ending balance when you're completely done. P is the principal. R is the interest rate, and T is time in years. And you're always adding 1 because you're occurring, like it's continually growing. So you're adding to it every year. This is the formula that you're going to use. And on the bottom of your page, you have this box. Right? You're going to use the knowledge we just went over to figure this out. The truth is this box part doesn't have any work to be done. It's just asking you which one of these numbers tells me the initial deposit. Remember, the initial deposit is the principal. So which number in this equation represents the principal? Which one is the time? Which one is the interest rate? Which one is the ending balance? Based on what we just talked about. This one you need to work. Okay, and it's real simple because it says how much interest did the above account earn? If $1,000 is my principal, $1,477 is what I ended up with, then the difference between these 2 numbers, subtracting it, will tell you how much interest you earned. One final thing here. If you have some extra savings that you know you're not going to need for a while, you have been putting money aside and putting money aside and putting money aside, interest rates skyrocket, and you can invest $5,000 into something, couple of options here. A money market account. Money can always be withdrawn from these accounts. You might get fined, you may or may not. Money is withdrawn through a debit account. It pays higher interest than savings or checkings account. And there's a star here that says no monthly fees. It will depend on what you're doing. I actually just had this conversation with a banker because we're looking at investing some money in an account for a friend of ours who's having a baby, sort of for a 2018 year thing when this baby becomes an adult. And there was a initial deposit required, I think he said of $500, but it expired like in 6 months. So you could put a big chunk of money right now with this bank account into this money market account for a set amount of time. It's going to then expire and you can gain the interest on that. And then ideally you would have more money to add to it. Go into a different money market account and do it over and over to gain your interest, but then it's kind of tedious and I don't really want to do that. Another option is a CD. I'm not positive how popular that is anymore. When I was in high school, I know a lot of people did CDs. The problem with the CD is that you are required to leave it there. You can't withdraw it. If you do, there are going to be penalties. If you have an early withdrawal of a CD, they will penalize you. One benefit of a CD is that it is fixed interest, which means it's not going to change. So if you have a set of money and the interest rates skyrocket and you invest that money in a long-term CD, you typically lock in that high interest rate. So even if the interest rate plummets, yours is not going to change. Most CDs do not have a monthly service fee. However, they typically require a larger interest amount or an initial investment. So the best thing that you can begin to do right now for your future financially is to open a savings account and start purposefully putting money aside. All right, finish up the rest of those pages in your work packet, and that's it.